Hello, everyone. It's Jofa from Spirited Events by Jofa. I have with me today William Stillman, who is psychic medium, and I'm going to spend some time asking Bill some questions so you can get to know him a little bit better. I've been working with Bill since 2016 and have had some amazing experiences with him, but I'd like you to know who he is, how he does what he does, and hopefully spark your interest to attend a future event. So hello, Bill. Welcome today.
Hey, Jofa, thank you. Great to be here with you.
Thank you so much. I just have some general questions I want to ask you and see if you could possibly fulfill, or not fill, but fill us in on who you are a little more.
I'll do my best for you.
My first one is easy. How long have you professionally been doing psychic medium work?
Well, at the time that we're recording this, it's the very end of August in the year 2020. And this month, I'm going into my 17th year of doing this professionally. Now, I sort of dabbled a little bit for a few years before that. So probably about 20 years total, but it was 17 years ago that I decided to put my big toe in the water, so to speak, and launch doing it on a professional basis. And
Can you believe it's been that long?
It has flown by, but you know, the really fascinating thing about what I do, and I know that you know this, is most of what I do, I have no memory for. I develop an almost instant amnesia.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really fascinating. So in some ways that might be a little bit of a protective buffer for me so that I don't get so absorbed and immersed in all of it. But I honestly don't remember most of it. And I know when people come back to see me, they'll say, you know, don't you remember me? I was the person who's, you know, such and such. And I'll say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I see a lot of people, but I also have that amnesia.
Right. But that's your professional hazard, I guess.
Yeah. But 17 years professionally as of this year.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's flown by.
Well, then let me ask you this. At what age did you actually know that you had these amazing gifts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I kind of came to it in a rather circuitous manner, because a lot of times you hear about people who are psychics or psychic mediums, and they've been doing it their entire life, and there's a family history there of people who have been doing it and you know, reading palms or tarot or things. Not so with me. As a very young child, I was extremely sensitive and open, and I had a lot of really unusual things happen to me, like making predictions of things that came to fruition, or having like really powerful dreams. And because of being really sensitive and extremely unusual, there was a point at which I became sort of persona non grata in terms of my same age peers. Mm-hmm. And I was socially ostracized and bullied. And so unfortunately, I didn't have a support system in place within even my own family. And I began to reflect back what other people were projecting upon me. And so the abused became the abuser. And I became really cynical and bitter and ugly, unfortunately. And so I sort of descended into this downward spiral and got very much blocked up. Mm-hmm. So all of the sensitivity that I had from birth up until about age 11 or so totally shut down. Wow. Unfortunately. And so I became very attracted to dark things.
You wrote about that in Under Spiritual Siege, correct?
There's a book I wrote called Under Spiritual Siege, where I wrote all about it, because every week I am contacted by people wanting to know what to do. They're having all sorts of paranormal activity in their own homes, or one of their children is, you know, having his or her sleep disrupted because of something evil in the house. And so in a way, in hindsight, I'm maybe disempowering all of that stuff by illuminating the truth and putting it out there. But for me, it all got blocked up. And it wasn't until I was in my late 30s, early 40s, where I really made a conscious decision to put effort into transforming and becoming an improved version of my old self. And that also included reclaiming my relationship with God, about whom I had been completely dismissive and indifferent all that time. And Jofa, once I made that commitment and I reestablished that relationship and I practiced contributing to that relationship every day, man, everything just shot through the roof. And I made up for decades in about 3 months or less. I was like on the fast track to learning. It was an extraordinary time. And that is when I not only reclaimed all that sensitivity of that little boy I had been, but that's when I began to do the work professionally.
Wow. That's fascinating because you've had quite the life, and I know how you live your life presently, and it's through love and giving, and so you have gone like both ends of the spectrum almost. That's a fascinating.
You know, I want to just clarify too. You know, I'm not completely sweetness and light. You know, I'm a human being. I'm a human being, and you know, I still grapple with depression. I still grapple with, you know, some cynicism here and there. But I really do try to set a good example, and I want to be as authentic for other people as is humanly possible. So I'm gonna have a pretty strict regimen when it comes to my mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being.
Well, I want to talk to you more about that in a minute, but first I wanted to let everyone know that you've been very open about having Asperger's. And you've actually written some things about how you believe that has actually enhanced your gifts. And can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes. For people watching who are not familiar, Asperger's, well, it's been folded into the overarching category of autism spectrum disorder, but it had been under the autism spectrum as a standalone diagnosis at one time. And this is only something I discovered about myself when I was in my 30s.
Wow.
And that's not unusual for someone my age to have come that far without a diagnosis. But again, for people who don't know, it's sort of a milder cousin to autism, milder version cousin of autism. And so what that does for me is a couple things when it comes to being a psychic medium. First, I naturally think in pictures and movies. And I was in my maybe 20s or 30s when I realized that the average person doesn't. And that just totally floored me. I panicked for you actually, because I didn't I was wondering and worrying, like, what's in your head? Empty blackness? Like, because everything that I'm discussing with you correlates to images that are being projected by this motion picture projector, and I'm seeing everything that we're discussing. And so when we're talking about that in the context of being a psychic or a psychic medium, those kind of internal visuals, that's called clairvoyance.
Right.
So I'm already doing that just as a matter of fact regarding how I think naturally. So it's not such a leap to go from those internal mental images to those internal mental images that are impressed there by another source.
Right.
So that probably gives me a little bit of an added advantage over the average person. And the other thing that corresponds with being on the autism spectrum is the sensory sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
So I call it spidey sense for the layperson. So what people need to understand about me is that my entire physiology, my senses and my emotions buzzes and vibrates at a frequency higher than the average person. So you take what you know to be typical for yourself and then sort of magnify that outwardly by 10, and I'm in there somewhere.
Wow.
So that pertains to the harshness of certain kinds of light, for example, gives me headaches, causes me to feel fatigued.
Mm-hmm.
noises and certain kinds of noises can be overwhelming. The sensation of certain textures of fabric against my skin can be irritants and agitants and so on. So anything that is abrasive or intrusive with respect to having such exquisitely painful sensory sensitivities probably works to my advantage in making it a little bit easier for those external sources to work with me.
Right. You know, I hope you don't mind. I wanted to share one of you, excuse me, when you talked about having the sensory overload. One of the first times I remember you and I met, and you may or may not remember this, we met at a restaurant. And I remember where we were sitting at the table, right behind you was where everyone would return their dishes and their trash and so forth. And I do remember almost every time they dumped that stuff there and things would rattle, you sort of cringed a little bit. Yeah. At the time, I didn't quite understand it, but it makes perfect sense now.
Thank you. Yeah, I was probably wincing and cringing every time. Yeah.
Yeah.
The average person just doesn't understand it.
Right.
But like I said, you know, those two components of being on the autism spectrum probably work to my advantage in giving me a little bit more of an edge over the average person who's doing what I do.
Right, right. Well, let me ask you, we've done many events together, and I know prior to those events, you sort of have a routine, a preparatory type scenario. Can you explain what you do behind the scenes before you come out to greet everyone?
Yeah. Well, I think you're referring to like a gallery, what we call a gallery event, where we have a gathering of people in the same room. Well, I first want to let people know, Jofa, that I have enjoyed every moment of my interactions with you. I have found you to be a gal of such extraordinary professional integrity in all that you do. And even though we're talking about some pretty far out stuff, you know, you have legitimized it through your professionality, if that's a word. I'm not sure if it is. Your professionalism, that's a word.
Okay, there we go.
Your great integrity, your graciousness. You have been an absolute joy to work with. And I'll let you know this also, and people may not realize this, I have 7 agents. I have 7 people representing me, and including yourself.
Right.
You're the only person that's ever been able to create anything and make things happen for me.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know, you and I talked about when we first did meet, there was some, again, sense that even I felt that we were supposed to do things together. And I've been blessed to have met you. And like I said, we've had some pretty amazing experiences, anything from, like you said, the galleries, conversations with dogs, the Under Spiritual Siege events. You know, we even have done the ET and UFO events, which I never thought that'd be something I'd get into, but they were fascinating. I know the connections that you've made were, it's just overwhelming to some degree.
I think the first time we met, it was for a private session between the two of us. And I think by the end of the session, you said, well, here's who I am and this is what I do. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, I want to do stuff with you.
Right.
But back to your question, to prepare for a gallery, like, I don't think people really realize how much effort goes into the preparation in advance, because I'm not only conscious of, you know, how I conduct myself mentally, emotionally, my physical health and well-being, and then the spiritual piece of it, but in preparing for the gallery event, what I had done pre-coronavirus was about 48 hours in advance of the event, I would go to an antique mall and I would say a little blessing in my car. I would go in with my pad of paper and pen, and I would start to walk the floors of the antique mall, and it didn't really matter which place I would go to. And my attention would get drawn to very unique and specific items, just seemingly randomly. And I would jot these things down. And what I found was that informed where to kick off my event. It was all intended to single out the one person in the room for whom that information made complete sense. And it never fails. It is the most amazing thing ever. Now, you and I have, in the age of COVID now, we've done an online psychic gallery.
Correct.
With people from all over the country. And because of being quarantined, I wasn't able to get out to an antique mall. So what I did differently was I had a stack of old magazines, a nostalgia magazine called Reminisce, and where people would contribute like stories and photos from their childhood and happy memories and things like that. And I would just do one at a time. One magazine was going to be for one person. The next magazine was going to be for the second person. And I would do the same thing. I would jot down things that my attention was attracted to. And it blew my mind that it worked every bit as well as if I had been walking physically through the antique mall.
Well, what fascinates me when you do that is you're not giving one or two or three, whatever you want to call them, hints but you're giving sometimes 6, 7, 8, and it applies to one person, and they can go through each one of those and tell you how it applies. It's a fascinating process.
It's so fascinating. I think people don't realize, this is so fascinating to me too. It's really intriguing, and I get blown away by what comes out. And because before an event like that, there's always this little twinge of, is it really going to be as good this time? Is it really going to work this time? Mm-hmm. And I'm never disappointed.
Well, I've never had that twinge that I think it wouldn't, because I know you're so gifted, so we've never had a problem with that. Well, I think this might give everyone a little bit better understanding of who you are and so forth. But what I really want to know also is, like, what do you find most fulfilling about this? I mean, it's quite a gift to have.
That's a great question. Well, I'm really nothing and no one special. And I think that if you have the passion and the desire and you wish to evolve, you can learn to do work similar to what I do, if not simply enhance your own personal intuition. Mm-hmm. I think that we all have gifts and talents, and we all have spiritual gifts and talents. And you may not be intended to do exactly what I do, but that doesn't mean that you can't be using to your advantage and to be of service to others your own personal spiritual gifts and talents. So I just want to say that. But in response to your question, for me, the most rewarding aspect of my job is it's actually two things. Okay. It's to help people to find peace and closure and resolve and healing. Mm-hmm. Healing. And that pertains to any outstanding issues or questions or concerns where their loved ones who have passed on are concerned. Correct. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I absolutely love, that just thrills me to no end, is when someone is open to hearing the intuitive suggestions. I didn't want to say advice, but the intuitive suggestions that are being made, and they take it to heart and they act on it. Mm-hmm. And then when they come back to see me, I may not remember exactly what we talked about, but when they walk in that room, I see someone who is glowing, and I know that they have created a transformation in their lives, and they sit down and they update me on what's happened. And it is truly extraordinary what people have done in, kind of reclaiming their birthrights, mm-hmm. and, doing what they are, right. And manifesting their destiny.
Well, that's lovely. It really is. And I can imagine hearing those stories must be so fulfilling when they come back to you, no doubt.
It's really rewarding. And, some of those people have ended up doing work in our field. And I am then pleased and proud to know them not as clients, but as colleagues.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, like I said, I've witnessed amazing things throughout all of our events. I don't think there's been one that we've had that's something sort of like, wow, that just happened,
Yeah, so. I don't think we've had anything that's been off but I gotta say, you know, the events that blew me away were the extraterrestrial.
I know. Like I said, I never imagined I'd do that.
Yeah, people who are watching this may not realize, but I ended up channeling an extraterrestrial,
Right.
and it was pretty wild.
Well, what I found wild is like we would do psychic galleries, and almost, I think there was a time almost 4 in a row, you just happened to pick out somebody and said, you've had some interactions with extraterrestrials. And they're like, yeah, you're right. So yeah, it is pretty fascinating. Oh, well, I totally enjoy working with you. And even though we're doing this now through Zoom and not able to do it face to face, I'm sure that there will be future events where we'll be together again, face to face, which I look forward to.
Me too.
But we do have some Zoom things coming up. Again, like you said, this is the end of August of 2020 that we're recording this, but we do have a psychic gallery coming up. You're doing a developing your intuition. We're doing a conversations with dogs about how to communicate with your pets. And I'm sure we'll put together some other individual events.
Yeah.
For people that haven't had the opportunity to do it, I would highly recommend booking an individual reading through William. You can contact me or you can contact him on his website at williamstillmanpsychicmedium.com, correct?
William, right, William Stillman Psychic Medium is the Facebook page. WilliamStillman.com is the website. But people should just bypass all of that and book an appointment with you directly.
Well, I'm happy to do that. We can do face-to-face or we can do through Zoom. That's unfortunately the way that we may be doing it for a little while, but for those of you that happen to be not in the Pennsylvania area, it's to your advantage. Now you have an opportunity to get a private reading from William. So thank you again, Bill. I hope everybody gets to know you a little bit better. And I look forward to the day when I can give you a hug and say, hello.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, Jofa. You are an amazing gal, and I love what you do. And it's been wonderful. So thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.